Hello, welcome to this meeting of the Tampa Salesforce Marketer Account Engagement Community Group. Today I'm going to be doing a live workshop focused on how to route prospects to different owners to get them into Salesforce in different ways using the available automations and functionality that exists between account engagement and Salesforce. A little bit about myself. My name is Ben Lamoth. I'm a Salesforce MVP, Golden Hoodie recipient, and part of the Marketing Champions program. I lead the account engagement and I'm part of the marketing technology team for a firm called BDO Digital. If you'd like to work with me in some capacity, feel free to reach out. Send me a message on LinkedIn. I'll put my email address in the chat. If there's something that you think that we would be good to work together on, let me know. And that's my pitch. This is not meant to be a pitch heavy sales kind of a thing, but just at the top, that's who I am and that's what I do. So today we're going to be talking about routing, and in account engagement or Pardot, it has a lot of routing functions that exist in every org, whether you've got growth or you're on premium. There's functionality that works with both Pardot and Salesforce together. And routing, the kind of prevailing or predominant use cases around routing is what happens after a prospect either gets created via import, form completion, landing page completion, API integration, or something happens where there's additional firmographic data that's learned about them that makes them a legitimate lead or contact to be then worked by sales. While account engagement or Pardot and Salesforce are closely aligned and closely integrated, there are steps that have to be taken in order to move them from account engagement into Salesforce if they don't exist there already. So what I'm going to be doing is talking about some of the more traditional use cases that I've seen and how one can run these different routing and assignment processes out of account engagement and into the correct either functionality or automation in Salesforce or in between Pardot and Salesforce using existing functionality. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. If you want to let me know where you are joining from in the world, feel free. But I expect this will go for about an hour. And then the recording will be up on Pardot Geeks and the event page, and I'll also post it up on LinkedIn. And I will email the recording to everybody when it is available for those who RSVP'd. We have Austin, Texas, and Fort Lauderdale in the house. What's up, Eric? Hi, Joelle. All right, so let's start with what is routing. So routing ultimately is ingesting a record and routing them to the right person. When someone gets created in Pardot, they need to go somewhere. They need to go to a queue a Salesforce queue. They need to get moved into Salesforce to become subject to active assignment rules. They need to be assigned to a specific user based on criteria. These are some of the things that are that you will typically encounter as an admin or somebody who has responsibility over your account engagement org, and you have to work with sales, who you presumably are working closely with to manage these incoming leads. So first, I'm going to look at a form. So I updated this form here, just to use as an example. So I've got a form. This is a standard form. You can do the same thing for a form handler. And if I look at this form online, I see first name, last name, email, company, and I added state. So what's important about state is, in this example, I'm going to demonstrate the steps that we need to take if you are routing people via to a specific owner using like a regionalization, like a regional account responsibility. So if you have a sales org in the US and you've got people whose responsibilities are like Northeast, Southeast, Southwest, Pacific, and whatever, those geographical identifications are one thing, but they need to be translated into data that's coming into Pardot, whether from a form or from some other means. So if someone were to fill this form out and they selected, let's say I'm in Florida, so they selected Florida. When this form gets filled out, I now have a prospect who's has first name, last name, email, company, and the state is Florida, and they're new. I now need to be able to send them to the right person based on that state. In order to do that, there's a couple ways that you could do this. You could do this using a you could use this if you happen to have a singular person who's responsible for Florida and you don't need to do the assigning of the region. If you don't need to say, I need to create a field that is Southeast, for example, you could just do this out of the form and assign people using a completion action that says, okay, I already know that the assigned user, I can use the conditional completion action. So let's get rid of this. If I create a conditional group where I say prospect custom field, or default field rather, state contains, and I say Florida, Georgia, South Carolina. Let's just do those three. If someone fills the form out, if they meet any of those criteria, I can trigger any number of things. If I happen to know, and I don't need to do the transformation to say, if Florida create value of Southeast, if that doesn't need to happen, then you could just do it in here, saying if any of these things are true, assign them to a queue or assign them to a user, notify. You can do any number of things if you don't need to do the transformation of the region. However, if you do need to do a transformation of region, because Southeast is a field that has value, that means something, you're going to want to create an automation rule. And so this is where you would set the region to Southeast. So we have an automation rule that I created. I just started to create here, where it says, if there's a prospect in the database who, when this person fills the form out, they would be now in the database and have a prospect default field state of Florida. Should that be true, the action I can set, because this is now transformation, because the completion action can't do transformation, and it can't do amending of records based on other criteria. It can only trigger actions based on what exists today. So this will say if their state contains Florida, Georgia, or Louisiana, I created a custom field called region, and I have these 4 regions in here. But I know that Florida, Georgia, that for my company, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, South Carolina, Alabama constitutes Southeast. That's how we've divided the country regionally. So knowing that, I want to create this automation that will set the region to Southeast. Cool. Okay. Now I've got the Southeast thing figured out. From here, you've got 2 options. If you only need to do this for a single Southeast and you don't need to run through a series of regions, an automation rule works perfectly fine. But most organizations I've seen is that is where routing needs to happen, needs to evaluate based on a series of criteria, and then to assign to the right person or queue or whatever in a it needs to evaluate and assign in a single automation. So in this case, it's going to be the engagement studio. So in this, I am saying, okay, I created this already. There isn't really a whole lot to it, but, and I think I actually created a list for this too. Let me just double check that I did. Yes, by region. So I would need to create a list. In this case, I just created it as a static list, but I would need to, after everything has happened here, I would probably actually want to create instead of a static list, it'd be a dynamic list. So let's redo this and say, let's create a dynamic list of assign prospects by region. Create a dynamic list. And in this case, it's going to be very basic because I want to grab everybody who has a region value. So I'm going to look for a custom field here. Region is not empty. Now that I've got the source, now that I've got the source list here, I can use the automations. I can use the engagement studio to build this. So I'm doing prospect routing, assign MQLs to use. I'm just assuming that it's going to be an MQL. Just for the sake of this demonstration, this is an MQL, or marketing qualified lead. Assign to users by region. I need to go in here and create and identify my recipient list, which is going to be, let's see here, assign prospects by region. I don't need any suppression lists or any emails. Now I've got the list that is going to seed this, and I need evaluation steps. I'm going to use a rule, which is an evaluation step. It's going to look for prospect custom field. Region is, because I've got the automation rule that is now assigning Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Alabama to Southeast. If the region is Southeast, I've now got options. For this example, for this particular one, I'm going to say, I'm going to assign this to a Salesforce queue. You can create like when you create a queue in Salesforce, those queues become available to use in Pardot. Parham, yes, the recording will be available. So once you create the Salesforce queue, you're now available. It's now available in Pardot. You just have to go through the process of adding the queue, and it's pretty straightforward. It's just like 2 clicks. So now you've got the queue. Presumably this is going to be named something accordingly. So I just call the Q1 and Q2. But if I say, okay, I've got this Salesforce queue that I need to, if someone is in the Southeast, I want to add them to Q1. If they aren't, I need to keep going. And I'm going to do another. I'm going to listen, evaluate for the custom field. Region is Southwest. Let's say I need to do, let's say like Southeast, we've got a queue for that. That's a big region. Southwest is not as big of a region. So I really just need to assign this to a single person. So I'm going to assign this to a user. It is critical that the user is mapped to Salesforce, between Pardot and Salesforce. So I'm going to assign this to myself. If it is Southeast, Q1, it's going to go to a queue. If it is Southwest, it's going to go to me as a user, which will create this record as a lead, assuming that that's how you have the sync set up in Salesforce, and will assign me as the owner of this lead. So we have now successfully so now with this, using regionality, you'd have to create, there's the steps to manage the regionality is to have the ingestion, whether it's a form or landing page, import that is setting that has the states or the zip or the country, whatever the regionality is they're using. And then the automation rule that is able to identify, that has the lists of the regions and how you organize yourself regionally, and doing the transformation, say if state is this, or this, then set the region to this. You're going to want to list either a dynamic list or a static list, depending on how you're adding them, but a list that is going to then collect everybody who has a regional value, has a value in the regional field. And then if you have multiple regions that you need to go through whenever you have people who come through, because you could have 3 people from the Southeast tomorrow, 5 people from the Southwest the next day, or a mixture of the two across all days. So you're going to want to create this engagement studio to be able to then do this assignment using the regionality once all the steps have been set up to that point. So that's the first way to do this, using regionality. Kelly asked a question, curious, what is repeat rule when creating automation rules? Are you asking how the repeat works? Is that what the question is, Kelly? What does the checkbox do? Okay, that's a fair question. So on the automation rule, for setting the region, if I were to check repeat rule, then this will allow a prospect to become eligible for this automation rule more than once. By default, automation rules are one and done. Once a prospect goes through it, they will not go through it again. They become ineligible. But if this is a rule that people need to be consistently running through, you can set the minimum days before eligibility to repeat. You can either set no unlimited matches or limited to only one time that they can rerun it. So the next option here is something that Beth asked a question. I was wondering about something related. If a prospect changes region, should account engagement manage rerouting? So if the prospect already exists, if the prospect exists now in Salesforce, then and you have updated data on the leader contact, I would run the routing through Salesforce. I wouldn't outsource the routing back to account engagement if you can avoid it. Because if once the data exists, this should be thought of as before it enters Salesforce, doing as much work as you can to assign it before it hits Salesforce. Once it's in there, there should be active assignment rules in place that will identify when it happens, when the regionality changes, and assign and reassign it accordingly. So I have this option here. I talked a little bit about queues. So let's look at queues here. So I'm going to go into account engagement settings, and we're going to go to user management. Going to click users, and then view queues. So these are 2 Salesforce queues that I created, and I'm going to show you kind of it's fairly straightforward how one would do that. So go to setup, and then look at users and queues. So I've created 2 queues here based on the supported object of lead. You can create them for lead, a contact, whatever. But what'll happen here is I added these 3 people into the queue. So if you've got a region for Southeast, you're gonna have all your Southeast sales reps, your Southwest, and then your Southwest sales reps, and so on. Then it's gonna become like a round robin. However you've set up the assignments and the queue kind of relationship as it pertains to sales rep volume and so on. But this would be how you create those queues, and you create the different the names and the people who are in it. And then once you go into Salesforce, you click a little button. I've got no additional queues because I've synced both of them. They're both here. I can click into the queue and I can see all the prospects that are in that queue. It doesn't show me necessarily, like, I can't edit much about the queue. I can just select the queue. I can't change the name. Everything is in Salesforce. But if you need to be sending people to queues, you have two options here. You can do it from a form straight off. You can say, okay, if somebody fills a form out and it's fairly straightforward. If their state is, I could do the conditional completion action, whatever the field is. If they're, where's the default field? Default field, let's say country is, and then I can, let's just say United States. If it's United States, I can assign, I have a queue option in here. Assign, oh no, that's group. Assign to queue. And I've got Q1 and Q2. If the country is United States, assign to Q1. And then I can do again, same thing. If the default field is North America, if the default field is, let's say, Canada, or let's say another country, country is, let's say, United Kingdom. I can similarly send them to another queue. This is good. This is ultimately like all of the pre-work here is going to be around the creation of the queue and the people in the queue to align things accordingly. So the Pardot piece of it is fairly straightforward. It's just basically making sure that you have taken whatever the criteria is that Salesforce is using for queue assignment and replicating it in Pardot in your automations, so that people are being put in the queue from marketing based on the criteria that is already in effect by people who are managing Salesforce. Eric asked a question, does the push to Salesforce depend on every 15-minute connection, or is there some immediate option for those looking to measure speed to lead? There's my understanding is that it's, I don't think it's 15 minutes. I think it's shorter than that. I'd have to look, but I feel like 50 minutes feels long. So it might be shorter than that. If you need to like push everybody right away, I mean, everyone has to go through the connector. Everyone has to go through the sync queue. So if you need to force the sync queue, I mean, you can do that manually. Yeah, no, absolutely. So everyone, there isn't like another path, Eric. It's just everyone has to go through the connector. So let's look. I'll just show you. So in the connector here, we've got the sync queue and sync errors. This sync queue is the queue between Pardot and Salesforce. So it's empty right now because this is a dev org. There's nothing in here. But the sync queue will get triggered. There are different triggers: Salesforce to Pardot versus Pardot to Salesforce. And whenever those actions occur, they automatically get put into the sync queue, and they just start cycling through. So depending on how large the queue is, it can sometimes take a while. If it's only a handful, then it can be pretty quick, typically. But that's ultimately how that works. And that's what'll happen when you use like the queue assignment, for example. They'll get put in the prospect sync queue, and then they'll get resolved in Salesforce. The other options for a queue, if you don't want to run it off of a form, you can do kind of what I was just demonstrating, where you would use a automation rule. If you have a bunch of criteria that need to happen before you, if there's more than just a single form fill, if it's country is the United States and this and this and this and this and this, if all these things are true, then add them to this queue. That is where an automation rule can be more helpful, because you can see, because if it's adding to queue here, but you need more than just that custom field. You also need other things. Then you can set all of these things to be true. It can be more particular. It doesn't have to be as single threaded. Jen asked a question: to save the Salesforce replication in Pardot, would it not be another option to run an automation to send people to MQL queue, let's say, so they are in Salesforce, then have a Salesforce flow to run the routing? Yes, you're exactly right. If there is another option, if you don't want to do the routing, manage the routing and have more flexibility, if there's more that you need to do than what Pardot may be able to do, yes, absolutely. And I've seen that. I've had a client where they said, literally, all I need is to get him in Salesforce. I don't need Salesforce. I don't need Pardot to do any of the routing, any of the management. I just need to get them in Salesforce. And once they're in Salesforce, I can build more complex flows. I can build a lot more complex criteria. I can load balance my queues a lot easier. That is absolutely true. If you need to, if it's a more involved use case, or you need more control, or you're more comfortable building flows, and then that is absolutely true, Jen. You don't have to build any of the routing criteria in Pardot. The use cases that I'm demonstrating are the scenarios where sales comes to you and says, "Hey, we need sales to be putting people in the right place. We need marketing to put people in the right places." So it kind of becomes placed at marketing's feet to do the routing correctly. But if you do have the headcount, the people who can manage these things out of Salesforce, then absolutely. If you just need to get them into Salesforce, the quickest way is just to add them. To add them to a queue, and then the queue just maybe doesn't even do anything. It just literally brings them into Salesforce and creates them. From there, you can then build all of your record triggered flows and so on to do your more complex assigning. But in the scenario where marketing is asked to do more of the upfront work out of Pardot, queues do give you that ability to build more complex criteria using and or statements, to say, if all these things are true and this or that is true, then add them to the queue. And you can do the same thing with a engagement studio. So the other thing I want to mention is because we talked about regions, we talked about queues, talked a bit about states. I do want to talk about active assignment rules. So active assignment rules is one of those where, kind of like what Jen just mentioned, where if you just need to get them into Salesforce and you've built all of the architecture for rules. So that would be like in here, so if you have your lead assignment rules in place for example, Southeast, if you have a bunch of criteria here that you want to add, knowing that, so this is going to be 2, you're going to look for whatever that criteria is. If it's a country or a state or however it is, once you have this created, this becomes and then you check it as active, it becomes an active assignment rule. And how that translates into Pardot is the ability to use automations on your forms, on anything that has the ability to use a completion action, an automation rule, a form, etc. So if we're gonna, let's look at it on a form. So if we have a form and we need to, and we know that we have all of the active assignment rules already in place. It's already been built. The heavy lifting's already been done. We just need to get them into Salesforce. This is a quick way to get them in there. Just click Assign Prospect via Active Assignment Rule. What will happen is this is basically kind of a pass-through, kind of an over-the-top pass-through into Salesforce. So once you get them in there, now it becomes subject to kind of like I kind of like to think of it as like kind of like the swirling winds of your Salesforce. It's going to get picked up by the right wind and put in the right place. Once that lead assignment occurs, and that's been saved, the record is saved, what will happen then is now once the assignment has happened, it will then be reconciled in your Pardot org. So that prospect who you sent over into Pardot, they're into Salesforce via the active assignment rule, they will get assigned, and their ownership, assuming that that user, that Salesforce user is also mapped to a user record in Pardot, that user assignment will then be reconciled in Pardot, and you'll see it there. So this is less of a like, you need to create the queue. This is, if you have your active assignment rules in place and they're very kind of thought out and intentional, and you just need to get them in there. Whenever a form gets, so you can then set this on a form, set it on a landing, set it on a form, automation rule, completion action, any of these other things. Engagement Studio, you can send them over using that. Pardot supports the ability to do really granular assigning. If you've got, and because I've seen it where clients have very specific criteria. They say, I only want to send a lead to Salesforce, or I only want to MQL them. That's the other thing. If you only want to send them over if they meet the threshold of MQL, and then when they do, I need you to put them in the Southeast queue. Okay, you would do that using your scoring and your grading. I talked about that in the previous session, where you build it out. You say, okay, I've got my threshold of score and I've got my threshold of grade. Once that's true, you build like you could build an automation rule or a engagement studio that looks for those scores and grades and says, okay, they've met the threshold, they've been tagged MQL or whatever it is. If you set a tag or add to a list, from there you would then say, okay, now that they're MQL'd, put them in this list. Assign them to the Southeast queue because they're in Florida and they're MQL'd. They met the MQL threshold, so assign them to that queue. That is how you can do it that way. Or using the active assignment rules, if you've already got it set up, you can say, okay, I'm not going to push. That sales says do not push anybody into Salesforce from marketing until they've MQL'd. And after they've MQL'd, according to how marketing measures it, just send them into Salesforce using active assignment rules because it'll see all the criteria, all the field values that already are present, and we have the lead assignment rules in place that will grab them and put them in the right place. So they may not need you at all to do any of the if state is this and region is that and da. They may have already done that in Salesforce, and all they need you to do is have all the criteria in place to be able to push them into Salesforce once the MQL threshold is met. Kimberly asked a question, where's the best place to send any lead notifications from? Seems like there are multiple ways to do this. I often end up with clients that have duplicated notifications set up from different users. So Pardot does have the ability to send a notification. If somebody gets assigned a lead or a prospect in Pardot, it is possible to send a notification. Salesforce also has ways to notify lead assignments. You could also, if there's also like a task, if you want to, if you're triggering the assignment to the individual, you could assign the record to, let's say, me, and then in the next step, like if you, like this is just an example. This may not fit your use case exactly, Kimberly, but as an example, if you were to say, there's this automation rule, I'm going to assign prospect to me, and then I'm going to create a I'm going to send a task, create a Salesforce task for me that says new assignment. That you've been assigned the new lead. That is one way to do it. Not everyone uses tasks, so it may not be prevalent. You can trigger a notification. Jen, are you asking? Can you see what a task looks like for the Salesforce user? I can try. Let's see here. So I am going to. Okay, let's see how this works. I have this. I'm going to assign it to me. I'm going to send me. Actually, no, I'm going to do this on the form because that'll probably be easier. Actually, well, no. Actually, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new prospect. And let's see if I can see it in my org. So let's see here. Additional information. I'm going to give myself the state of Florida. And oh, I put that in the wrong spot. That's why. All right, so I'm going to create the prospect. And I am going to create the automation rule. And I'm going to resume it. And it may take a minute because these things don't kickstart immediately. But we should hopefully be able to see it once it runs. Oh, hey, there we go. You're right. All right, let's not worry about that. That's something else. Yes, I got it. I know. Mark all is red. Yeah, different notification. So while we wait for that, because it still hasn't run as me, run on mine yet. So what we've gone through so far are different ways to triage prospects when they come in. And I mentioned before that there are different ways of looking at it. If sales asks marketing to do as much pre-work as possible, because sales just needs the leads, and they don't want to have to build the kind of architecture to manage it, like to lead routing, lead management. Say, okay, marketing is just generating leads, but we need you to send us the right leads. They're good, put them in the right place. You've got options to assign to an individual user, to assign to a queue, and to use active assignment rules. Those are really the three that are the most common. You can do a group, but I didn't really think it was worth mentioning here. So it's individual user, active assignment rules, and queues. All of the criteria that Oh, okay. You were referring to email notifications. All right. Sorry, Kimberly. So I don't think I set that on my user. Let me see, because I can edit the preferences of my user. So send an email when a prospect is assigned. So it may send me what's the email? Yeah, I'm using my work email. So it may show up when I need it to here, assuming that it runs. It still hasn't found my user yet, but it'll get there. But what it'll do is it'll send a Pardot email. It'll just say, your user has been, like, you've been assigned a new prospect in Pardot, and it should show you all of the prospect information, because you've got a lot of options here to for that awareness. When you go into the preferences, you can get emails when you get for daily prospect assignment emails, visitor activity emails, and then so on. But if you want to be notified as an email when you are assigned a prospect, that is an option. It looks like it hasn't. Looks like the automation hasn't run yet. Hasn't found my prospect yet. But that is how that would work. So we are coming up on towards the end here. I know we kind of covered a lot of ground, but this is all. I was ultimately just wanting to kind of do a live walkthrough of the different. Yeah, no, it is pretty annoying, Jen. They are getting pretty slow. I wanted to show you guys how you could the different ways that exist to be able to trigger routing, to do routing for prospects when they come in. There's ways to be a lot more complex, and there's the ways to be very basic. Ultimately, it's going to come down to what does sales need, what does sales ops need, how and the individual business processes that exist at the company that you're working at, and how sales likes to manage their queues and their assignments and so on. Once they tell you how they want to receive new leads from marketing, you can either build it in Pardot or build it in Salesforce or build part of it there and part of it in Pardot. However, whatever your level of comfort is and whatever your organization will allow. But those are kind of the different ways to do this. Had some good questions. I hopefully this automation runs. May not run in time to before we end here. But just Kimberly, for your kind of benefit, it would be like I'll show you. There might be an example I can show you from like a system email. Yeah, so this is an example of a system email that you would get, except instead of this, it would say, it basically would be all the prospect information for who was assigned to you. Because and if you want to see it yourself, if you were to run this, you can go into account engagement settings and click system emails, and you'll see a record of all the system emails that were sent to users. And it should include assignment emails. And it's going to look like most Pardot emails that you get from the system. All right. Well, I am going to let you guys go. Thank you so much for joining. The next one, I'm going to go into a demo kind of scoring categories, kind of how they're used, what they can and can't do, what you can see inside of Salesforce. That's something that's not always well understood, is that what you can see from scoring categories from Pardot in Salesforce, and so on. So that's the next one. I'm going to be doing a couple more, and I do have another meeting scheduled real quick with. It's going to be about surveys, how to turn account engagement into a kind of survey tool. It's going to have a guy named Mark Summers. Recently was the Pardot administrator over B2B at Snap, and he has experience with building surveys out of Pardot. He's also very strong in Salesforce. So things he's going to be sharing is a mixture of Pardot and Salesforce functionality. It's pretty detailed. So if you have the technical chops and the interest, it is on March 7th at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. He's going to walk through what he's built, how it works, what it can and can't do. I'm pretty excited about it. It's going to be an interesting topic, and it's basically building a survey without using a survey tool, basically without buying one. It's basically if you have the chops and the interest to build it yourself, he's built it. He's built something that he seems to be pretty happy with. I haven't seen the end result, but I think it'll be pretty cool based on some of the notes I saw. So I think it's definitely worthwhile to see what he's built and whether it's something that's worth the effort to build yourself, or if it just makes more sense to spend the money. Yeah, I will put the recording up online, and I will email everyone when it's ready. Yeah, absolutely. Go RSVP for that. And if you, listener, have something that you're interested in presenting about, if you have a use case, a unique use case, a tool that you built, a problem that you solved, and you'd like to talk about it, feel free to reach out. I'm always interested in having guest presenters in addition to the stuff that I do. So yeah, just let me know. Let me know if there's something you want to do. I will see you guys at the next one, which is on March 7th. And then after that, we're doing the scoring categories. So with that, have a good rest of your day, and talk to you soon.